you know,
He's Victoria's
he was
alter
the
ego?
deputy,
Okay.
yeah, and been 38 years.
But he's following her footsteps, or he's a
He's
new
just a
path?
great guy, great guy, brilliant engineer.
So why'd you leave?
Different opportunity. So, I was Chief Communications Officer at DOT for 3, and then this presented another challenge, so why not?
Nice.
Okay. Well, you certainly have stepped into a demanding
Yes.
situation because of the low unemployment rate
Indeed.
and the,
All right, you're on, Wendy, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, May 17th meeting for the Ethics Committee. And we'll start with our call to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
So I left the agenda a little bit light because we're light on people. We might get through a bunch more or not. So the first one is, do we have amendments to the agenda? Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? No? All right, the second section is we need to approve the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes as written.
Okay, I second. Any corrections, concerns? No? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the amendments as written, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Great, so we had a couple action items to follow up on. So I sent out an email, but I printed this out as well. So I just mocked up some of the things that we could put on our webpage. Some of these shouldn't be here, should be here, but I thought this would be a good talking point to what do we want on our front facing. So it starts with basically a one sentence of what we're supposed to be here. We can change the wording to whatever, but it seemed like one of Neil's concerns is we want it crisp and clean about what we're here for, what we can do and can't do. In my job, in engineering, we always start with what's in scope and not scope, so I did a brain dump of what I thought those were. This doesn't have to be here, but I was trying to figure out a quick, easy way to say what we can do, what we're here for and what we're not here for. So,
Well, provide guidance. Guidance for what?
exactly, right. Tell me. These are all starting points, so.
We're only dealing with town employees, right?
No, we're also elected officials, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. But I mean, we're not dealing with two citizens.
Right,
It's got to be some connection to the town.
sure.
So provide guidance.
But we're giving guidance to the public about those issues.
But I think we need to say that,
Sure.
however we
Okay,
do it.
perfect, so,
So that guidance to whom
Mm-hmm.
on what?
yep,
I was, Wendy, just looking for the scope of the, wording of, for guidance about, I'm a words matter kind of a girl, so.
absolutely. And I wanted to do a starting point, but this is everything getting
And
mocked up.
You're right, Elaine, it's important to be consistent
Yeah,
and not expand things or
yeah,
create an apparent conflict.
yeah, that's, I'm just trying to find that document so that, you can, pull the verbiage out of that to say, this means X.
Right,
Or this is what the citizens of Weare have charged us with.
perfect,
And that means that we can do this for this group of people in this way.
right, perfect.
And that we're working on currently working on operationalizing that.
But that wouldn't be on the website.
No, but like if you're looking for an update, this is who we are, this is what we've been charged with doing. And then, you've been doing the monthly blurb, so to speak, because we talked about embedding that somewhere, that this is our progress.
Right,
So That's my framework in my head, anyway.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
I just am trying not to go too far afield from what the original said. Aha, here we go.
Okay.
There's the code you sign. Do either of you have the? Document that with the wording?
This one?
I don't know if it was the implementation or if it was the
Here's
original.
the code itself.
That's the one we signed, yeah, I have that one. What was in the warrant?
Oh,
The original warrant.
oh.
Or, that may have been pretty big, I don't,
No, the warrant itself was just, do you approve, but
Yeah.
the document that was approved, I thought I had that here with a date on it, here. So this was approved by the town.
yes. Yeah, that's what I was looking for, the original, that's dated,
May 14th or something.
yeah, March 14th, '06. So, that's our foundational document.
Geez,
Right?
I should,
Yep, for
I
sure.
should have that.
On which all things should be based, yeah, I have it too.
Absolutely.
Yep, so,
Wait, this must be it. Yes. Because I have on the back, May 14th.
yes, so that's the, yep, okay.
Right, so
So-
what verbiage does it have around our scope? Let's see, offer. So educate, provide advice and counsel to officials, board members, and employees regarding ethical issues. And here is a, like, we could take,
I would recommend we do,
yeah,
just to not confuse anybody.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Or, somehow inadvertently give ourselves some sort of authority that we don't actually have.
Absolutely,
you
and
know?
then, look, make it appear that we're trying to take
Yeah.
over the world or whatever. 100% makes sense. Perfect, so we'll start with that implementation charter instead of a scope thing. Yep. I also put in like specifically that we can't penalize people, remove people. I don't know if we want that there. My concern was people are gonna be like, well, you gotta fire this person because of this thing, and,
I think this is very helpful to know.
Yes.
That we're,
Okay.
that we're only giving opinions, and that it's up to town officials to take, or individuals to take
Okay.
whatever action they think is appropriate.
okay. So we can change whatever wording, but that was
Yep.
that thought. Obviously, agendas, minutes, recordings, those links. Then we have a bunch of docs, right? So we have the things that are approved by the voters that we can't change. That's the code of ethics and the implementation,
Yep,
right? And then I have a section for things that we approve once we get there. But then there's also the historical documents. Like I wanted to track the original inquiry form, the complaint form, written response, have them there, at least for historical reference, since they're not anywhere else. And then, I think this is kind of what you were talking about, Eileen, is that there's definitions. We're spending a lot of time working on what confidentiality means, what a complaint is versus an inquiry. As we cement those things, I'm thinking it would be helpful to have a short statement of what those are. We can,
Yeah, sort of like when you are reading through a policy and they take the section before the policy and define what the words mean.
right,
Yeah,
yeah, but obviously we haven't agreed to them yet, but at some point, I think having that, because we're spending so much time agreeing within ourselves on what that means, we should have some place where we define that. And then the second section was like external links, so that's the right to know law, corrupt practices, like laws that sort of align with the space that we're working on. We could add more or less. So that was my first attempt. We can take any of this on there, off there, change it any which way. I just wanted to have a discussion point.
The Executive Branch Code of Ethics,
Mm-hmm.
what's the relevance of that?
What I read on the municipal,
Association?
yes, thank you, they said the local one was sort of based on this one, and so I thought it would be useful to have it, but it doesn't, you're
Well,
right.
this applies to them.
Correct,
We may have based ours on it, but this doesn't apply to us.
correct. So, you know what, you're right, so we don't need to have it if it's gonna confuse people, I can take that off.
Right to know we definitely need. What is corrupt practices, and how does that relate to?
So it sort of defines the sorts of things that become ethics violations, let me see if I can find it.
Corrupt practices sounds like criminal,
Mm-hmm, but it.
taking a bribe, for example.
Right, I would say. Not even a little bit. We don't have public Wi-Fi here, right?
Yeah, we do.
Do we? What's it called? The TH Wi-Fi?
The TH. I'm gonna shout it out over there, but. Where TH Wi-Fi?
Yeah, it was in there, okay.
You find it?
It was in there, now it's gone.
Right here.
Oh, there it is.
If she clicks on it,
Mm-hmm.
you find my notes. That's right. Nothing like making it easy, huh? Oh, I found it. Let's see if you get that.
Nope, I did something wrong. Big, big. Oh, why do I have an, I got it,
That's a one.
yep. Got it, thank you. All right, so. Pure benefit. Public service agrees to accept pure benefits. It shows. It talked about PUCUNIARY benefit, which is advantage in the form of money, property, commercial interest, or anything else to which there is a economic gain, does not include, yeah, maybe not. I was trying to think of what kind of RSAs sort of relate to what we're doing, so, you know, we can stay with just the right to know to start, and if we find other things, we can add it there.
The reason, sometimes too much information is not helpful.
True. Yep.
This is not an academic exercise,
Mhm.
and so neither the Executive Branch Code of Ethics or corrupt practices actually affects the town,
Sure.
actually affects the Ethics Committee. It may, corrupt practices may affect the town, I don't know.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I'm good with that.
And there may be other things that we want to put there besides the right to know law, but that really depends upon perhaps what the municipal association can tell us and whatever Luke found out.
Okay. So we'll leave it just the right to know for now, and as we get things, we can add them in that section. That works. There was a comment in the, I think maybe the implementation, one of the early things. I know that the school board is not, we don't have standing over them. They have their own ethics process and people. But there was also something that mentioned that the library may or may not be under our jurisdiction, and so, if so, who's not in our scope? I wanted to call that out at some place, but.
I think we need to determine whether or not library employees, et cetera, are subject to this committee's jurisdiction. Library is sort of an odd bird because they don't budget the same way everybody else does. And their trustee, there's a separate statute that creates the library and library trustees and all that, and I'm not familiar with it. So that would be a good thing to put down to find out whether the library is subject to the Ethics Committee jurisdiction.
Would it be the same way with the fire department?
For the next year. Because they're dissolving in '24.
You're talking about the Board of Fire Wards.
Right, and they do all their own hiring.
Yeah, but they're a town department. We hire, the selectmen hire the police chief, the fire chief, right?
No, the Board of Fire Wards hired it.
But without the Board of Fire Wards, the selectmen are going to do that.
Right, and I said for the next year, you do have the Board of Fire Wards.
I see. I
Yeah,
see.
it's just until March of '24. And she asked that question.
Yeah, so it's sort of like walking through, like, it's a definition of scope, like who
Yep.
falls into these categories, right?
Right,
Like-
because the original one's pretty vague, right?
Yeah.
It's elected committees.
So when we say town employees, we're sitting here saying, well, are they a town employee or are they not a town employee,
Who
right?
who
So,
hires the firemen, Naomi?
Fire chief.
And the Board of Selectmen has no role,
Nope.
unlike the police department.
Correct. That's gonna change in March of '24.
But even so, I mean, if, we pay their salaries,
yeah,
Do the library too.
yeah.
so we're like the fiscal agent for those two groups of people-ish?
Well, as taxpayers, we also pay for the school administration, right? But they have a whole separate, everything, they have a whole, I know because I had to do all the ethics violations for the
So
school.
I think
right?
it's
So-
sort of like establishing what does it mean?
Right,
What's our
exactly.
definition of town employee?
Exactly, yeah, I think, maybe that's not the highest priority, but before we start taking complaints, we have to say what our scope is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds like, because it sounds like we're the fiscal agent, we being the town of Ware is the fiscal agent for the library, right? Because we pay stuff,
So
the
we
money,
do the
the money flows
payroll.
through.
So we do the payroll and
Yeah.
all costs associated with payroll, we take out that from the total that's allotted.
Yeah.
We divide the total by 12 and every first of the month they get a check. And they have their own checkbook, they have their own bookkeeper.
Are they in the retirement system?
I believe the full-timers are yet. Which is only one. Two,
Are they in the benefit pool?
they get the benefits here, yeah.
Mm.
But I'll just, let me rephrase that too, is they have their own personnel policy, which really mimics ours.
Interesting.
Yeah, one of the historical documents specifically said library question mark, and there was no answer, so I,
Could have very
we should
well.
figure that out.
Hmm.
So that's one of the actions as the committee, is to figure out.
Right, so determine who,
Well, in the town of New Durham, they have their ethics policy, and they define public servant. All town officials, boards, and employees of the town of New Durham, whether elected, appointed, paid, or unpaid. Well, these guys are employees of the town.
Yeah, I think that's a great,
Yeah,
that's a
so,
great- that's a
they're-
great definition.
yeah.
yeah, they're covered. I mean, I would think they're covered.
Sorry, I'm not even supposed to be talking. I'm full.
You're helpful, though.
And
so-
they use the word public servants
Right.
Yeah,
in their ethics policy. What do we use? What do we call them?
Indicate officials, board members, and employees of the town. So officials.
Well, officials would be like elected
Mm-hmm.
or appointed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Voluntold. Yeah, so the definition of employee, I actually like that definition.
And I don't know that the library has, the state ethics process like the schools do, so it probably does.
Well,
Inquiries, the Ethics Committee shall, this is our underlying charter. The Ethics Committee shall establish a mechanism by which officials, board members, employees, and residents may obtain advice and counsel regarding ethical issues. Upon the request of a town official, board member, or employee, the Ethics Committee may issue a written advisory.
Oh, not a resident.
Not a resident.
Interesting.
What was the original question that you asked that led us down this rabbit hole, Wendy?
Oh, I was just saying, I was just calling out the fact that I put exceptions here about who's not covered by the Code of Ethics. And I
Sure.
had down here, library, question mark, because it was on some form, and I
Sure.
just brought that up. for that,
Okay,
but-
I'm trying to
Yeah.
track from my own
Sure.
head how we ended up in this,
Yeah,
like here.
don't follow my brain, it goes like.
That's okay, I'm following the bouncing ball.
But-
Okay.
But whatever we put on the website should make it clear, whatever it is we think it's covered, and I think it would be a rather curtailed board if we couldn't go to the police department or the fire department and call them town employees. We need to check the library because there's a state statute on that, but I like the definition of public servant.
I do too.
So the fire ward is not, they're a complete separate entity from the Board of Selectmen. They have no reporting structure or anything. They're on their own. I know it goes away in a year, but.
Yeah, they have their Board of Fire Ward that makes their internal decisions. And hiring, firing,
Do they have a budget that's voted on by warrant, or do they get that from the Board of Selectmen, do you know?
I believe like any other town entity, Naomi, I'm gonna ask you, they're a pass-through, right? The Board of Fire Wards are a pass-through for finances? Ish?
We do all of the financial for them.
Okay.
They approve their bills and they drop them upstairs, we do all the payroll.
Yeah,
But when we do
They
the,
still meet though, like they met last night, and they approved the manifests. That still cuts the checks, nothing gets signed like the Board of Selectmen until they meet and make that approval.
but the town budgets for them on a line item basis, as it does for the police department, the highway department, the town clerk's office.
Yeah, there's always been a question as to why they even come to us. Because they do their own approvals.
ex-
But I don't know that you'll dwell too much on that, because it's done in March.
But wait a second, when you do the budget, Naomi,
Yep.
you prepare a fire
I know.
department budget.
The fire wards and the chief prepare the
Okay.
budget, bring it to us.
Do the selectmen ever change that?
We've asked them to go back and change. We haven't changed it per se, because the Board of Fire Wards are in control.
But on our March ballot, we have a selectman budget that we vote on. I don't remember seeing a fire ward budget.
It's total with ours, just like the
It's
library's
total with
wrapped
yours,
in
so
ours.
that is, I'm wondering if that's kind of where we,
The library's wrapped in ours too.
yeah, I mean, that's my distinction here, right? That, to me, they're similarly structured, even though, because they have an appointing authority per se that sits within those units, but they still are part of a larger town structure.
Absolutely, I'm just thinking about the vote that the town took. I can't believe that people thought that they were not covering the fire and police department.
Oh, no,
We should cover it.
yeah,
No, I mean, in terms of the ethics. It doesn't, it's not specific to that, but the idea that the
They're
ethics,
employees though. They're paid employees.
so the library people are paid employees too?
I think you're all one big bucket, just like that definition.
I agree.
yeah, I mean, I look at retirement, I look at benefits, I look at,
And you might know more than that is, Police is a union, so is it approached differently?
But like, I look at it the way and not to go down this path, but I will. So I work for a state agency. I'm one of many state agencies. We have policies that are shared, that are given to us through the higher authority, and then we all have our individual policies based on whatever it is, unique thing that we do. Doesn't make us any less state employees.
Right,
It-
for sure.
We're all in the same retirement system, we all share the same benefit structure, we all, we even have different levels of compensation, and, I have 6 unions that are involved with corrections versus like one union that's involved with transportation. So even that structure's different, but we're all still state employees, we're all still,
Fair.
So let's not,
yeah, I mean, to me, they're all employees.
right, okay.
I'm fine with that.
They're
I
all
mean,
public servants, as Neil said.
I guess unless the library trustee comes back and says there's some state law that says we're segregated and we do it separately, then we can have that discussion, but we'll assume they're part of
Yes,
this.
Well, do they, I'll make it real simple. Did they sign the code of ethics when they came to work? Those employees?
I believe that, yeah, on the onboarding package, I
There you
believe
go.
they did.
Okay,
There it is.
there you go, okay. Fair. All right, so I'm going to change the scope to the start of the implementation. I'm going to remove the RSAs that are not directly relevant. We will fill in definitions as we get them, and then when I clean this up, I can bring it back for another view, or I can just send it to our magical web people and say, this is kind of what we'd like, please.
What's your preference?
I mean, anything on, I'm good with either. I mean,
bring it back and
Okay.
let the other 2 people take
Fair.
a good look at it, too.
I'll do that.
There you go.
Sounds good. Yep. Excellent. Our next subject, we're gonna have to wait on, because Luke is not here. He was gonna call the municipal association to find out if the inquiries can be non-public by default, so we'll have to wait till he's back. The one ongoing discussion we've had is around the confidentiality inquiry versus complaint. I don't know if we want to continue with that tonight, or are we still blocked by that discussion?
I think we have to wait for Luke.
It's sort of foundational on that
Yep.
information for me.
Yeah, I agree. So, do we want to start tackling some of these other things, or?
Well, isn't 2, right to know, a part of transparency with confidentiality?
Sure. Sure. The only reason I called it out is there's laws about, what people can see. And I don't know when it comes to an ethics complaint, do you have a right to query who put in general, who put it in, what it was about, and the details. So, yeah, I guess after the last meeting, they are kind of tied, but, so that's blocked. The disclosure, obviously, that's the, how do we know what we have to disclose and when? That's a pretty huge topic.
So 1, 2, and 3 are really are related.
Mine's-
You're looking at your agenda, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just was trying to
Yeah,
figure out which one you were looking at.
so timelines, the only thing I saw in writing was like, how long till we get the written response out, but not how long till we initially respond, how long should we have from investigation? I think that's all vague. We may want to keep that vague, or we might want to set some expectations of, if somebody sends a complaint to our email, how long before we send an initial thing, or get it on the next agenda, or that sort of thing. And I don't even know, that doesn't sound like we can even get there until we understand the process.
Yeah, just in general, one of the problems with our legal system is that there is so much delay because of the complexity of the system and the fact that various participants find delay works to their advantage, that I would hope that we reduce delay to the absolute minimum possible. If somebody files a complaint, we should be able to deal with that at the next meeting, so to speak. I'm speaking just generally. It may
Sure.
not work out for a
Yep.
whole variety of technical reasons, but the school board put in a policy about library and who could complain. Aside from the fact that you have to have a kid in the school to complain, we can talk about whether that's a good idea.
Well, no, I think they changed that in the final
Did they?
wording. Yep.
Good. They were going to meet like twice a year. So if you had a problem with the book, you might have to wait, in April, you might have to wait till their meeting in November when they would consider everything. And I'm thinking to myself that delay is, nobody wants to serve on a committee, and it's, takes all sorts of time to do it. That really adversely has an impact on the community's sense of fairness and justice. We should not delay things. We should, if somebody files something, we should deal with that as expeditiously as possible. I don't know specific timelines because there are too many other things going on, but we should not, for example, make people wait a month to inquire about something. Yes, it'll mean the committee has to meet more often, but until we see that there's a huge workload, we should feel it's our duty to meet promptly after a complaint is filed to deal with it, so that these things get resolved quickly and they're not dragged on.
Sure. I think inquiries are easy enough, right, so that we can make those quick and my concern is when we get to complaints, if there's an investigation we have to do before we deal with it, it's not gonna be necessarily expeditious, but.
It's sort of like, in the, not to go here, but in the judicial system, when, depending on what kind of case you bring, they're like, okay, well, we think this will be 90 minutes, we think this one will be whatever. If it's longer than that, we go to another session, but, so they operate off like a hearings calendar, so to speak, right? And so you may have, back-to-back inquiry,
Sure.
where you can take information and it might flow a little bit more freely than, say, an investigation where you know that there's gonna be some time in between those sessions for a little bit of investigation and understanding what's in front of you a little bit more. So to Neil's point, I think we can be a little bit, I think it's important when someone musters up the courage to come forward with something that you address it as soon as possible and say, okay, this is our plan, this is what you can expect from us.
For sure.
And, depending on what our calendar looks like for that meeting, we may have ample opportunity to have a full discussion, or it may get extended into the next meeting. So we may look at our structure and say that we have inquiry meetings and then we have investigation meetings that are two totally different types of structured time.
And it may be that, as a practical matter, we can't investigate rapidly because it takes
Sure.
a week for somebody to respond.
Right, and because an inquiry is that person and us having that discussion, that's pretty straightforward. But a
Right.
complaint where you have to get both sides in the context, and you're right, they might not respond quickly. That one might be a little bit slower. But I absolutely agree that as fast as possible, because if we don't deal with it, it's gonna be dealt with somewhere else, right? So, yeah. So as we move forward on some of the details of our processes, I think the three of us, their quorum, can agree that reasonable time, as quick as is reasonably possible. And to Neil's point, maybe we can't meet once a month if there's an ongoing issue, is completely reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, we had originally taught, I'm just slating, right now, we're doing work sessions, so we're doing 3 work sessions a month based on, I think. May is an interesting month because there's 5 weeks in it, so, that one I'm a little off on, but it was like first, third, and fourth.
Yep.
That was our structure. I think when we get through the bulk of, this foundational process-driven work, we'll then look at, re-examining. We may have the same cadence to the meetings, but maybe the first and third are this, and the, fourth is something else, and I think it might be driven by what we're seeing
Fair.
So, you know, knowing that that structure is gonna be subject to edit based on what we get,
Mm-hmm,
and that it's evolving,
for sure, yep.
and being transparent about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it may be that the first week of every month, we see what we have in front of us and establish a schedule based on that. You know, that first week is our planning week for what's in the queue,
Right.
you know, and leave a little bit of extra for walk-ins, you know, so to speak.
Judging by Dunbarton's experience, business is not going to be robust.
Yeah, you know, so that, I mean, that's my fond hope, you know, that we don't have a slew, you know, that we're not overwhelmed. That's my fond hope, because that means that people are behaving well.
And hopefully what we've done with the guidance and the education and explained to the community in general, you know, what is ethics versus not ethics, what is,
I think part of that education, I know I'm sort of going sideways, but I think part of that education is understanding, because somewhere in one of these documents, and I, for the life of me, I can't remember which one, I think there was a statement in there about exhausting all the other possibilities before you get here.
right,
And I think probably at some point, we need to talk about that. It's one of our agenda items, like what are the other options, right? And then also educating the public a little bit about what those options are,
correct.
right? So
Right.
like, and I'll give you an example, and I'll pull from like voting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you walked into voting and you saw something that you thought was objectionable and unethical, and, you know,
Yeah, somebody's wearing a shirt,
you're hot around about the collar around it, right?
okay? But somebody's
And-
wearing a shirt advertising a certain candidate.
Sure. And so, you know, depending on what year that happened, it may have been a violation, and then the law changed, and now it may not be a violation.
Right.
But understanding that, you know, how do you resolve that? Well, the place that you would go to resolve that is this and that. You know, have you reached out to, you know,
Right.
the Secretary of State's office and the attorney, you know, like, have you gone to those places? You know, and did you just not feel like it was, you know?
Sure, I mean, on the school board, it was easy, like, it's, you talk to the teacher, you talk to the principal, you talk to the superintendent, and then you come to the school board.
Yeah.
Always, it's the same, and I'd have that conversation over and over again. This is a little bit different, because we've got employees, we've got unions, we've got elected, we've got citizens who see behavior they're concerned with. So the more we can sort of document that, I think that's a really important education piece as well. Right.
It's D, complaints. This is on the Code of Ethics implementation. When signing the complaint, the complainant shall certify that he has read the Code of Ethics, believes the matter within the complaint is a fair subject of inquiry, and has exhausted all other avenues of relief available to them within our town government.
Right. But that's not defined, what that means.
No, it is
Right.
not.
So,
But
So, but mapping that out, right? So if you're a town employee and I've got I feel like you've done me wrong.
who are you, a town employee?
I'm just a person.
Okay.
I'm just a citizen. And I feel like a town employee has done me wrong. Do I understand the chain that I need to ratchet through? You know, do I understand that ultimately it goes to, you know, their department head, and then from their department head to the administrator, and then from the administrator to the board of selectmen, right? Like, do I understand that as a resident of the town? I may not.
Well, let's assume that you do understand that, and you take your complaint, and everyone says, sorry, the employee acted appropriately, and you still feel it's not. Then you go to the ethics committee?
You might, right? Because you've met that standard, you've walked through, you've attempted to resolve it. I mean, the bottom line on, I think, all of these things, right, is that there are many situations where regardless of the interventions all along the way, a person still may not feel like they got their needs met.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it's kind of interesting, though, if the chain of command goes through the Board of Selectmen, then it comes to us, and then we say, oh, yes, there is an issue. It goes back to the selectmen to how they want to handle it, so,
Yes,
right, so,
but the selectmen then are in a somewhat different position,
Mm-hmm.
because an independent body has said, whoa, you guys need to reconsider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I'm
So,
adding
but I
that.
think maybe structurally outlining that, like,
Yes,
you know, the chain for this group of people would look like this, the chain for this group of people would look like this, you know, so that, you know, being fully transparent, like, have you walked through all of this before?
that's really important, Elaine,
Yes.
because otherwise, folks will come to us and we'll say, gee, you did 3 of the 7 steps, what about the other 4? They need to know in advance that these are the
Correct,
7
yes.
steps.
especially if by the time they get to us, they've talked to 3 other groups, they're very agitated, not heard, and then if we say, yeah, go away and talk to 4 other people, that's not great.
Informed consent.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, and that should be on the webpage.
Yeah, I added it to our list of topics. I think there's gonna be some research there to figure out what those avenues are and what we wanna define and who do we talk to get that information. Fortunately, Eileen knows a lot of this.
Some of it, I mean, some of it, but, you know, for the boards, depending on what the board is, you know, because some of the boards are appointed, some of the boards are elected, right?
Right,
And so those are 2 different paths.
right. And then if it's a firefighter or a librarian, they have
That's-
their own, and then does that eventually go to the selectmen or not? Because they have their own governing board, so they, do they go from the fire board straight to us? Like, I don't even know what those processes are, right? So I think we definitely need to put some time in figuring that out.
You know, yes, and I think maybe sending a note to the chair of each and saying, what is your inner grievance process? You know, how do you resolve complaints internally? You know, and what's that structure?
Would you be surprised to find out they don't have a process?
I hope that I'm not that surprised, but I think that some of them may have it formalized, because some of them may have certifications and licenses that are dependent upon that, so they would have to have it formalized, and then some of them will not. So, depending on the profession I think that you're talking about is gonna dictate a little bit of what is required.
Right. And I wonder if the bodies who have union representation, so say the police department has a different escalation chain than, does Public Works have a union?
No.
No, so they probably have a more direct to the,
But they, you know, the nice part for all of those organizations is that they usually do have a professional association that may be guiding some of that, you know, for
Sure.
example, when I think about DPW, I know they have an overarching linked to the municipal association,
okay.
you know, where they do get a lot of technical assistance. So I'm hoping that they have one.
And I'm thinking a group like the Finance Committee, they probably goes from them to selectmen directly, or they're appointed by, are they the town?
So the
They're appointed by
moderator-
the moderator.
Yeah, the moderator is elected.
So you go from the Finance Committee to the town moderator to,
The
That's an
selectmen
interesting question.
actually, yeah, the selectmen
Yeah.
actually don't have any, because they'd have to be separated, right? Because the finance committee is an independent
right?
organization reviewing all of the financial aspects of all of town operations, right? So they have to be separated. And then you have an elected official, and so the elected official, it would never be the Board of Selectmen, it would be, again, back to Secretary of State related, like filing a complaint, and they usually would move to, there's, I think it's been rare where somebody has been ousted, like votes of no confidence and that sort of thing, but I'd have to do some more research, but I don't really know that many. There are some positions that sort of Lone Ranger.
Mm-hmm. And probably for good reason, right? I know they need to oversight several budgets, and so if they had a reporting chain, that might produce what they could.
But remember, the only kinds of issues that we can consider are code violations. So if somebody says, well, I don't know, if somebody says a town employee was pocketing some town property and using it for his own personal benefit, that probably is a crime,
Yeah.
and it probably also is an ethical violation. So that could come before us too, I guess. Okay.
So, I mean, I can certainly come up with sort of a bulk email, send it to each of the committee heads, and see who responds.
Yeah, just to see what their path is.
Yeah?
And, for the sole purpose of education, that, one of the things that we ask people before they come to us is that they exhaust every, they climb every mountain,
Right.
they turn over every stone, right, before they get here.
So
That's really a good idea to get from each department head what their process is. Or, and if you ask the town moderator, he's gonna say, who the hell knows? If we had asked you, what would you have said?
If somebody had a complaint about me,
No,
or,
You appoint finance committee.
Yep.
Somebody had complained about the finance committee. What's the process that you use that these folks have to go through before they can go to the ethics committee?
I would have said to bring it, and probably, I'm sort of transparent, so we probably would have had a discussion within the finance committee about whatever the issue was. The interesting thing, so there's 91A stuff, right, that committee would be subject to. There's conflict of interest stuff that committee would be subject to.
Conflict of interest in the ethics or?
Yeah, and in disclosure, right? So,
Yes.
right, so like, when I think of the things that
But-
those committee members would be subject to in this code that they agree to, right? So if somebody came to me and said, somebody didn't disclose a clear conflict of interest, and I think that there's a, violation of the code of ethics. And you come to me and I say, well, thank you for coming, but I disagree with you. Town moderator, I'm playing town moderator. Thanks for coming, I don't see any conflict here. Thank you for bringing it to my attention, I've noted it, that so that person is now met the standard and they can come on to the ethics committee.
So when Wendy writes you and says, what's your procedure for dealing with these violations? Because the rule requires that a person go through these processes before coming before the ethics committee. Your answer is going to be, A, I don't have anything formal, but here's what I would do
Yep.
were something to arise.
Yeah.
Okay, and that needs to be on the website.
And, but understanding that each person probably is going to go at it differently, right?
Certainly.
Because there is, one of the things that's interesting about that role, right, is you get to make some decisions about how you do a bunch of different things. You get, when you're dealing with the legislative body, you can very clearly put it to vote and get overrode, but when it's just process stuff, right, one-offs,
So, but the point is, are you saying so that each time there's a new town moderator, we have to ask that person?
I think so.
No. Okay. And probably the same thing is true with the town department head. That person might decide to do things differently from his
If-
predecessor.
But that would likely be in policy, right? So there might be an overarching policy of how the town of Ware deals with complaints. I don't have that information.
Naomi, is there a policy by which the town of Ware deals with resident complaints about town employees?
Anytime there's a complaint about the employee, I give it to the board.
Directly? So
They can either have it looked into,
Joe was very insulting to me when I dumped my garbage.
What's insulting?
He
Just
called
like
me a
junk.
slob.
It's very tough, Neil, because, you know, someone can call and say, you know, my neighbor's got junk vehicles. Just because it's not a 2022 or 2020 or newer, doesn't mean it's junk. So it's very hard, but to answer your question, any complaint that comes in, I give to the board. Then they can decide amongst themselves what they wanna do. Typically, they'll invite the person in and have a conversation. There's two sides to every story.
Okay.
So they'll do,
A non-public.
A non-public
Yeah, because the
investigation of
accusation
something
can be completely off, but you still are afforded to,
Oh,
because you're still afforded to defend yourself.
but
and,
non-public.
and town employees'
Yeah, because-
personnel issues.
Under 91A3, Roman 2C is reputation.
Yeah.
And if you're a citizen or an employee, you need to, if all that's accusations, just something that didn't happen, you already aired somebody's issues to the public.
Which is what we've been talking about with how we were gonna structure it.
I've just
Yep.
been listening.
Yep.
So there's no process within a department to deal with complaints?
Well, if the department head deals with them to a degree, sometimes the answer's not what somebody wants to hear, therefore they write to the board.
But let's assume the person goes to the board. Does the board say, did you check with the department head to see, before you came to us or not?
I've been had one in a while. I would think that's the first thing. When I get a phone call about a complaint, I ask them to talk to the director or the department head first.
Okay.
If they opt not to, because they say I'm not gonna get anywhere anyway, I wanna talk to the board, I ask them to put their concern in writing, I would give it to the board. But I do direct them when it's on the phone to me, is I direct them to the department head first.
And is the request that they give to you in writing subject to right to know?
I'd have to ask that, because, you know, I could kind of half listen and write down a couple things.
No, I mean, when they write down
No,
something.
and that's why I asked for it in writing, Neil.
Yeah.
But I don't know, depends on what it is. Could be very egregious, could be one of your protected things. And then
So
you're
we need-
really
we need the
opening a
answer to
can of
that.
worms.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think it's not a black and white. You're gonna run across things that you're gonna really scratch your head at, I'm sure. Hopefully not, but.
I
but think
believe,
common sense will avail.
I
Put
think,
yourself on the other side, think about that.
I think my concern about documenting on the web, these are all the policy, this is the avenues. If we're now saying every time there's a town moderator, that process can change.
No, I wouldn't put that down. I would simply say, if there's a complaint, if, for complaints about the finance committee, see the town moderator first.
Yep.
Without more. If there's a complaint about the fire department, see the fire chief first.
Okay,
Police department, see the police chief first.
Okay.
Public works, see the
well, that's
director.
easy, like, I think we could probably
That's a
figure that out,
champion.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I might send that out just for education to each of the committees and say, we're trying to figure out.
well, at the bare minimum, I think, you know, when I go back to the overarching goal here, right, is around heightened awareness on all sides, right? So not just for, I mean, everybody is our constituent here to some degree. So if I'm a department head and I can't answer the question of how I would clearly deal with something, it gives me information about, okay,
Sure.
I wanna start to think about how I manage these
Fair.
things, because now there's this other entity that, you know, after I get through my process, I want people to be able to understand where's the end of my process, so
Right.
that they can begin the next process.
And in line with that, we don't want this process to be so complicated or so complex
Yep.
that it turns people off.
Correct.
My God,
Yep.
I'm not going through that.
Right. I guess that gives me an opportunity to introduce myself too as well, so it's all good, I will do that.
So that's your action item?
That's my action
All
item.
right, I'm writing it down.
Okay, it's in writing, so it's true. Yeah, I don't think we can answer, if we're going down the list, I don't know that we can say what our hearing is gonna look like, because we don't even know what our complaint process is yet,
Mhm.
but that's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And in our first meeting, there was a question, we have in writing that we can require somebody to show up to appear, but can't arrest them, so what do you do if people don't know? So again, that's a later topic. The next one was communication, and I think we just talked about that. I will at least start the conversations.
Where does it say that we have subpoena powers?
It says we have the power to require employees, elected officials to appear. It doesn't say the word subpoena. I threw that in.
Okay. Presumably, if they don't, their employee record is dinged.
Mm.
So if somebody didn't show up, I would think that this board would write to the selectmen saying, please note that your employee failed to meet his obligation under the code adopted by the voters of Weare because he failed to show up for a hearing on such and such a date.
Yep. Issue.
I wouldn't use the word subpoena.
Sure. Understood.
Inquiries, I think, is foundational on number 5.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
Meaning that, about do citizens need to fill out a written question, or can they do so at a meeting? We're waiting to get some technical advice, or,
From the municipal association, right? Can we keep them non-public until we choose to make them non-public?
It's absolutely essential that whenever anyone comes before us and for whatever reason doesn't have something in writing, that those minutes accurately reflect,
Oh, I
because
know.
there will be no record,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody is going to come away with the wrong conclusion.
I meant, and I agree with you, I'm a fan of people writing their own statement, but what I meant for the purposes of discussion tonight is that we're waiting for information from Luke.
Yes.
And so I wanted to try to table that
Mhm.
discussion until Luke was here, and we could have
Yep.
a more robust discussion based on what he provides us.
Agreed.
Which brings us to spring training education meeting. We are in spring.
Correct.
Until
We're
June
almost done with
22nd
spring.
or
Right.
21st.
So, that's an interesting conversation, because when the section talks about education, does it talk about an education session for employees? Does it talk about an education session for, so I was thinking about this.
Number 2, the
Yeah.
Ethics Committee shall hold a meeting each spring for newly elected or appointed officials, and I assume newly elected board members and newly elected employees, so that they may familiarize themselves with the provisions of this code. And 3, it's the responsibility of the supervisor of a new employee to ensure that new employees familiarize themselves with the provisions of the code. So we're not educating everyone under number 2, just newly elected, newly appointed, new board members, new employees.
So we fall into that category, right? So are we in a position that we think within the next month, we can hold that meeting? Or are we requesting that we
Well,
understand what?
it would be awkward to hold the meeting and have somebody ask, well, if I file a complaint, or a complaint is filed against me, is it confidential or not? And we say, well, we don't know.
Right, right.
I'm trying to remember, Because I think I've been guilty of handing this across the table and saying, you know, let's sign this, and I know for myself, I've signed it on several occasions, right? And we all, in the course of business, sign lots of things, you know. I'm a director of HR, right, at the end of the day. People come in and sign lots of documents with me. So, you know, to me, it's a discussion about, like, there's the operationalizing the process, right, which is one issue. And then what is this code, right? Like, what does it mean? What are we asking for? What is it? Because, like, you know, you ask 6 different people what respect means. People can most of the time tell you what respect is not,
Sure.
right? They're very clear on disrespect, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty on respect, what is respect? It becomes a larger conversation. I go back to the state. The state has done probably, I think, 6 or 7 renditions of dignity, respect, civility, those types of training in the workplace. The current governor has an initiative on it. You know, there's a online Moodle training for every employee that they're required to take. The training went to the House of Representatives, it went to the Senate, it went to all of those places over the course of the past couple of years, right? So that's separate, like, that's raising awareness about how do you treat people, which is different than how do you file a complaint, how do you, right? So it's establishing a framework for discussing issues about how we conduct ourselves, how we treat others, right? And trying to understand what that means in public office, in employment.
So are you saying that we could do an educational campaign, assuming we understand the code itself, but without the process issues being part of the education?
I'm saying that if we were gonna have a starting point, because there's the work that we're gonna do, right? And we're operationalizing that work. But then there's the responsibility of providing education to people who maybe have never looked at what does this mean? And what is this thing that I signed?
Right.
And, you know, because when I came to office here, I said that I was going to treat the townspeople in a fair, honest way, and I was going to be responsible and accountable. I said all those things. I stood up, I took an oath of office, and then in this preamble, it says, describe the standards of behavior to which its leaders and staff should aspire to, right? Should, not shall, which I always go to, right? But, so that got broken down. What does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean?
So
you
what's
know?
dignity and respect?
Exactly. What does dignity and respect mean to you? What does it mean to the person next to you? And how do you manage it when you have a difference of opinion about dignity and respect? What's the steps that we would like you to take as a town employee if you feel that you're being treated disrespectfully? How would you manage that? Where would you go? What steps would you take?
Did you just define the code as being in the eyes of the employee?
I just picked one aspect of it. So, and again, like, how would you define disrespect as a person who lives in town? Where would you go and what would you do if you felt disrespected, right? So we're doing that kind of by helping people understand what the steps in the process are if they feel that way, right? Because my idea of dignity and respect and Wendy's idea of dignity and respect may be drastically different.
Sure.
And so part of the discussion for me is understanding how you navigate challenges around these issues with people that you may not see eye to eye with.
So we're holding an education session, and you make that statement,
Sure.
and I walk away and say, I don't know what the hell that woman was talking about.
Sure.
I know what dignity and respect are. But she didn't talk about what I think it is,
Sure.
and I'm really confused at this point. This is education?
I
Sowing
think it's
confusion?
awareness, right? It's awareness, because
Awareness.
we are providing a context of what it is that we would like to see, what we'd like to see our leaders aspire to, right?
So let's see, I'm a town employee, I sign this, and now I learn that it's not my definition of dignity and respect, and it's not a particular definition of dignity and respect. It's whatever this committee decides is dignity and respect at some subsequent date, if somebody complains about what I did.
No, what I'm saying is that it's a discussion about, because people are going to invariably feel at some point or another during their career that they've been disrespected, right?
For sure.
So,
And different people will find disrespect in different issues.
their threshold for disrespect is always going to be different. You and I will always have a different threshold for what respect means,
Yep.
because we are just different individuals. And so that is going to be a common problem, and has been a common problem since the dawn of time, right? And we are never gonna get to a framework of defining dignity and respect in a one-size-fits-all for everybody. So understanding that this is where we exist, if I feel so disrespected that I don't feel like I can manage it, where do I go with it? What do I do?
Okay, and if the board rules against you?
I may still feel horribly disrespected.
But your personal disrespect, feeling of disrespect, has not risen to what at least this group of 5 people think is an actionable level of disrespect.
Actionable, you know.
Actionable in the sense that the committee finds that that these circumstances do not constitute disrespect.
Sure, but we can still find that, and a person is still entitled to feel however they feel. We're never gonna be able to legislate that, ever. And I don't think we should.
And I don't think we're saying that they're wrong with
No.
their feelings. What we're saying is that it hasn't risen to a level that we feel we need to recommend some other supervisor committee needs to do something about it.
So the message that I got is that I'm super sensitive.
Not necessarily. You may
No?
be totally right. You know, I'm never gonna tell somebody how they feel about something is inaccurate or wrong. What I'm gonna say is it doesn't meet this ethical threshold, it doesn't meet that. And it may be, you know, I mean, I've been dealing with employee issues for 20 years, right? So, let's say somebody in this workplace drinks somebody else's Diet Coke out of the refrigerator
Without permission.
without permission. And that person feels like the other employee should be written up for theft, should be fired, should be, you know, and their supervisor walks through it and says, you know, can you two resolve this at this lowest level? Do you need me to get involved?
Can you
know,
replace the Coke?
Can you replace it? You know, like trying to make all the different types of recommendations that a supervisor would make in a workplace. All of that happens, I'm still not made whole. I don't feel safe putting my Diet Coke in the refrigerator, right? So the
Okay.
supervisor's now assigning shelf space, like you're on the top shelf, you're on the side, like, and I'm walking through this because
This has happened.
this is real. And I still don't feel like I'm whole. So I've now made a dignity and respect claim with the state of New Hampshire about my Diet Coke because it was not resolved at this lowest level.
Okay,
And looking for action. You know, so probably the state of New Hampshire is not gonna do a full-on training program about the proper placement of Diet Coke and how you should appropriately ask another individual about how to get a candidate right. Like, they're probably not gonna do that. And they're probably gonna say every avenue has been, you know, walked down to attempt to assist you with this issue. There's nothing else that we can do in this process.
so the person comes
The
before the
person
committee.
comes before the committee, and we may say, like, you know, it sounds like, you know, that a lot of attempts were made, you know, I can understand that this is very distressing to you, but, you know, we're not seeing a major ethical violation, that the body has done everything they can to support you. And so this is as far as we can take it. You know, we would make recommendations to the town, but it appears that they have done made many attempts to mitigate the fact that your Diet Coke has been drank.
Okay, and let's assume we come to the opposite conclusion,
That we believe that the town should,
that this kind of behavior is the kind of small but very personable level of disrespect, especially since this was the third time.
okay,
And so we issue an opinion. I don't know whether we'd have to have a hearing, whether it was a formal complaint or
Sure.
not, but we issue some sort of an opinion. Number one, that may satisfy the individual.
Sure.
Or certainly help assuage. But there may be no necessary change in policy or behavior as a result.
Sure. Yeah, but we're still, never going to be able to, on the education end of it,
You're right.
establish a threshold that is right and just, right? So it's about understanding the discussion that we're having. It's about understanding that different people look at respect differently. And that you will, at some point in your career or using town services or inadvertently, people disrespect each other constantly.
Now let's go down to integrity.
Okay.
Number two. I consider carefully the impact of my actions on public confidence. I maintain integrity at all times and consistently do what I believe is in the best interests of the community. Okay? Diet Coke again.
Okay?
The fact that an individual would take someone else's property, trivial amount perhaps, raises questions in some people's minds about whether you might take town property, for example, fill up his gas tank at the town
Sure.
pump. If
But
we
what if
still
the
have one.
person had diabetes and they were feeling shaky and they didn't, they had nothing and they couldn't get anywhere? And they took the Diet Coke because, they were feeling so poorly, they were afraid they were gonna have a medical event.
Or they had their own Diet Coke in there, they forgot they drank the last
Yeah.
one, and they accidentally grabbed it, right, so.
Intent. You never know.
With people like you on the board, I'm not sure anyone's ever gonna bring a complaint
I have,
before us.
I have to tell you,
Wow.
It's real though.
These are
It's
real.
Yes,
And
I
when
believe
put-
you.
When you put humans together,
I had a case of employees that didn't speak to each other for 15 years.
Wow.
And then they had used a third party to pass work back and forth between because they wouldn't speak to each other. And got referred to me. I
After
started
15 years.
after 15 years because they were at a point of it being actionable with personnel actions. Because they got a new supervisor who discovered that they were using a third party to pass work and they wouldn't speak. She said, you have to speak to each other. I don't, you have to work together. And come to find out, it originated because one of them kept saying good morning to the other and the other wouldn't respond. And what had happened was one of them had put in earplugs because they were having difficulty focusing in the workplace, and the other employee didn't know that they had earplugs in and was taking it personally that they weren't responding to them. And that grew roots.
15 years?
15 years. So I have a body of knowledge about the way that different people look at things. So when I talk about dignity and respect, it's really about establishing an education program. It's really about understanding that people are different than you and that everybody defines these things differently. And when you come to an impasse where the intersection of disrespect, right, from your perception, how do you manage that?
Right.
So, are you saying that we can do an education campaign, or an educational effort now, without having completed the processes?
I think that we can begin the conversation. I think
Among us or with outsiders?
I think we could do it with outsiders. I honestly think because it's about, this is in stages, right? So stage one is let's raise awareness about issues of dignity, respect. integrity, right? Let's have education level 1 is just starting a conversation. That conversation may be a different conversation next year, and we've evolved a little bit. But I
Well-
think you can,
That's an interesting way to look at this. Is there a danger that board members will have different views and confuse the public by expressing those?
I think that what we would all get to, honestly, my goal in all of this is that if you can build awareness about the diversity of opinion on these kinds of issues and build a structure for people to try to deal with it at the lowest level possible, we may mitigate larger issues. It's my fond hope.
Right.
And that, at the bare minimum, maybe people will look at things differently.
So, would you expect people after participating in this to say, there are no rules, you've got 5 people up there, each with a different opinion. How can I possibly know what the rules mean if these folks have their own views and are inconsistent internally? I'm not going to the board.
If ethics were easy,
We need a board.
we wouldn't need a board.
Right, well, and
right?
and a couple of things that you said just sort of triggered with me. We're not able to act as individuals, right? So we have to agree on something and act as a board. So the
Right.
fact that we may disagree or see things differently, how we're going to respond is as a board. One of the things, both of the subjects that you talk about, and this is something, I've had people already ask me about ethical issues, and I say, well, it's not there yet, but if you have, you feel disrespected by someone else, really the first thing is to talk to that person and see if maybe they had earplugs in. Maybe, that's the easiest, most reasonable place to start. And if we can just start talking about what you see as a slight, they may not be aware that they slighted you, and those conversations help. If not, you have a supervisor.
Recourse.
Right, right, and just making that awareness that just because you're at home and you want to kick the dog because you're so mad at your coworker, they might be completely oblivious to the fact that they upset you. And I think probably every place we've worked, I know I've had that annual training forever as well, right? Assume that we have some sort of training for our employees, but maybe not. So maybe we could, if we want to do this in the next month, what would that look like? We want to have an actual in-person meeting, I assume? As opposed to-
Yeah, I think it would be a question to, because the people that it's identified are new employees, right?
Newly elected officials.
Newly elected officials, new employees.
Newly elected or appointed officials, newly elected or appointed board members, newly elected or appointed employees. So anyone who is not new is not subject to this education.
Yeah, unless they decide that they would like to be here.
They certainly can
They
come,
can
but I
come on
mean, and it also, it doesn't indicate that people have to attend.
Nope.
Shall hold a meeting each spring for. So we could advertise the meeting and,
And no one shows up.
and no one shows.
Although we're all newly elected, so we could do it for ourselves.
One of the things that we could do is poll, there are, I'm sure in your agency, organization, there is a dignity, respect, and civility training. I know probably, I'm willing to take a bet that in Luke's federal organization, there is one. I know there's one in state. Probably with the same overarching message, but we could preview a couple different versions and
Good suggestion.
pull the, because these are vetted trainings, and see what are the overarching themes. Because, it's my belief that the overarching themes are, establishing the fact that everybody has a different opinion and that, how do you deal with it when you trip over them?
Right.
Which are because those to me are the harder Like those are the more innocuous, right? Because if somebody brings us something that's like clearly black and white, like, somebody was, I identified a town official, taking, I don't know, pick something, tools out of the town shed. Well, that's not only unethical, it's illegal,
Legal, yeah.
and so those are to me, those are more clear. It's the Diet Cokes of the world, right? Or the, she doesn't say hello to me, and so therefore, I'm not gonna update her on work that needs to be done.
Right. Right. Okay. I'm doing solving this. So if we're saying we're doing it in the next 6 weeks, right?
Before we go ahead with this, we need to know what we're doing.
Yeah, I think
And your suggestion about,
is, let's vet some.
yes,
And then once we vet some, I think it'll give us a framework of when we could deliver. And it may be us saying, hey, we're trying to meet this standard, but we want to be clear and realistic about our ability to do so. So can we push back from a spring to a summer rollout? Would that be, and I don't even know who we'd ask if we would vet that someplace, but, or propose it. That's our proposal to meet this standard, understanding that we convened for the first time in the spring
Right,
after.
right. I think that was Luke's original question on this is we're first meeting in April.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to do training when we haven't trained ourselves yet. So do you think for the next meeting?
I can bring in a version,
Okay,
if you'd like to bring in a version.
on Dell or something, sure.
I have no version to contribute.
Okay.
Maybe we could check with Luke and see if he has a version to bring in.
Sure. Wendy, will you do that outreach to Luke?
I will, to
Okay.
Luke and Suzanne.
Yep.
They may have, in their past, some particular training that they found useful. Sometimes your company brings in third-party groups, and so there's some public
Yeah,
training.
I was part of the committees for like the last 10 years to create the training. So,
Really?
yeah, for state government. And then I was on the comms team for the last version that launched just as we were heading into the pandemic. And so that's Moodled.
Is there any evidence of the efficacy of this training? Or we just do the training?
That you'd have to ask the State of New Hampshire Division of Personnel. That was the sponsoring organization for whether or not, and I think in terms of efficacy for complaints, it would be probably looking at how many complaints they received that year versus the year before, but then you have to factor in that pandemic thing where everybody was working remotely. So it's kind of a hard question to answer, right? Because people weren't drinking each other's Diet Cokes that year, they were at home.
Yeah.
So,
I
good
do
question.
like the idea that, so often, at least in my corporate sort of tech space, you have to have a checkbox. Yep, I learned the PC things this year, and so I'm done. And then you don't pay attention to the next training because, yeah, I've already done this. But the idea that we're going to take a small piece and focus on it to move forward is not the same thing. It's a different perspective. And we continue that conversation going, I think that may work.
Well, we need a start point, right? And then I'm hoping it evolves. But bare minimum, right, when you're trying to teach somebody something is to raise awareness of why they may want to know what it is that you're attempting to teach them. Like, why is this important?
Right,
What is it and why is it important?
right,
And how do you play a part in it?
correct.
Because I can tell you that, even just thinking about the evolution of the discussion in state government was, we first started with the discussion of what it was and what your responsibilities were as an individual, if you felt disrespected. We then evolved to what the other party's responsibility was if somebody brought you something. Because you have to have a toolkit to be able to even state the thing that you're upset about, but you also have to have a toolkit to hear the thing. right? You can't immediately shut down when somebody comes to you and says, this thing that you're doing, I find distressing. So it's a two-way.
Do people do that, or do they tend to com- respond not to the offender, but to others?
I think it depends. I think it depends. I think it depends on the type of complaint, right? Like, Diet Coke is gonna be different than sexual harassment, right? So I think it depends on the severity. I think it depends on if there's a policy related to whatever the issue is. And I think it depends on, you know, there are skill evolution just in terms of emotional intelligence, right? So, you know, if you're someone who is not comfortable bringing forth a complaint, the response to you on that very first time, right? Like, this board was key. This board is key. How we treat somebody when they bring us a complaint, like, to your point, the timeliness in which we respond to the complaint, the way that we establish a safe place to discuss the complaint, the way that we treat the information when we report out about it is key as to whether or not that's part of this evolution, right? So establishing safety
And
helps-
modeling respect.
and modeling respect helps inform whether or not people are gonna continue to bring it. And I also think that having respect for both parties and the larger system, right? This group is key. So our ability to model holding differences, discussing differences of opinion, looking at things a different way, I think it's a mirror for what we want to see from our officials, from the community. You know, that's emotional intelligence from my viewpoint. So, to answer your question, I went the long way around the barn, but I do think it does make a difference. Or else I wouldn't be sitting here.
No, yeah. So the education is going to depend to some extent on what we learn from you and Luke
Mhm.
and Wendy
Yeah.
about what other organizations have done.
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys who likes definitive answers,
I know.
and I'm very uncomfortable in amorphous,
In the gray space.
touchy-feely
Yep.
kinds of things. And it will take some education on your part to make me comfortable with this approach, but I shall try.
Well, you know, but the part of this, Neil, the reason why it's important to have somebody like you and somebody like me together, right, is that when we get to the other part of this, when we're dialing down on what the hearing process looks like, and we need hard and fast about what the language is gonna be when we report out, it is critical to have somebody with that skill set over on this end. I'm in the gray space, right? I exist a lot in the gray space. I also exist a lot in the black and white space in my role. Finding the balancing act, because there are gonna be people who come in here and say, I don't like your response. You didn't nail somebody.
Right.
I wanted somebody nailed. Well, that's not what we do. What we do is provide an opinion. You know, you can then take that opinion and help inform you as you move forward in dealing with this particular individual or organization. You know, we want to support you in feeling respected and feeling like, you know, your community is a community that embraces your viewpoint, and we're giving you an opportunity to be heard. It's not necessarily going to satisfy every single person. We didn't promise them that,
Okay.
right?
I'm listening.
We didn't promise them a rose garden. We promised them a venue to be heard and potentially steps to mitigate their issue.
And sometimes, just having a place to go and have the discussion, and to hear other people's opinions about something where you feel very strongly, because you've actually come here, because you've been offended, or something is being done which you feel is improper,
Sure.
in and of itself can help people psychologically, but also offer other avenues to them, noting that, gee, maybe my rather rigid position on this is not universally shared, and I need to be aware of that. Okay.
So we
So-
have action items.
But you have action items.
Well, yeah, but, and we are, next time, we are going to be talking about the education
Yes,
piece.
so I will
To see if we can
bring,
do something.
I will bring mine, you will bring yours, you will reach out to Luke potentially to bring his, and Suzanne, if they have them.
When you say bring, I hope this can be shared.
Yeah, so
Before the
I'm,
meeting.
I'm going to, I'm either going to, share a link,
Okay.
or if you can't access it because you're not internal to that system, I'll bring my laptop and we'll queue it up here and watch
Or
it
you,
here.
you couldn't send an email to us including it?
I
As
don't-
opposed to a link?
What I'm saying is that it might be something that you can only access if you're internal to the state system. It might be only internal to state employee. I don't know if you can run it external. I don't know that yet.
Oh,
So I will find that out. If I can, we will.
okay,
And if I can't, we will do it here,
okay.
if that makes sense.
It's always helpful to me to have a chance to read something
Sure.
beforehand.
Absolutely.
So I will, my action items, I will write the other committee chairs and see what their processes are for escalation. I will reach out to Luke and Suzanne, communicate high level what we talked about. I know they'll get that from the minutes. And also if they have anything specifically around dignity and respect from their past experience, to bring it next time. Our goals being, we really want to start working on a process of if we could do spring training or move towards it, what that first step would be. I think those are my two. I think those are my two. And then you're gonna bring your piece, and if they bring their pieces, and then Luke, hopefully will have spoken to the municipal society,
Association.
association, thank you. I'll go have that down eventually. And then, based on what he has that advice, we can focus on education next time, or we may sort of go back to the inquiry space. Right,
Sure.
sound like a deal?
Yep.
Okay, anything else y'all wanna talk about? All right,
As I told you, I will not be here next week.
Okay.
that's
I'm out
right.
of state. I should be here all the other times.
so if we can get you links, that will be helpful, or you can watch the video, I guess.
There you go.
Can we, Naomi, point a, like, let's just say I can only show it in the room. I'm going back to Zoom and Teams days here. Is there a way to do it that Neil would be able to see it if he was watching the video later? Or no?
I know Zoom doesn't,
Yeah, okay.
the only thing I was thinking is if you hooked up to the laptop, see if you could put the TV on the board. And could you put it on the board?
Yeah. What,
See,
like
if you hook
project?
up to that HDMI,
Mhm.
the projector will put it there, and maybe we could turn it enough to see the board, shut the light out.
Could we possibly, and I, I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, do you guys run through like an orientation day when people come to work for the town? Do you have a formal orientation where you talk about that stuff?
Not really.
Okay. I didn't know what your
Yeah.
onboarding process was.
Depends, somebody usually shadows somebody wherever they're gonna start working.
How do folks, new employees learn about town policies and procedures?
Because our handbook is given to them, and the book said, the acknowledgement says that I've received it, and it's up to me to make myself familiar with it. Just like with all the policies that are attached. So I don't make you go sit over there and read it and then sign it. But if there's something that comes up,
But you have no formal day or session when new employees can come and ask questions about the handbook?
Nope.
Okay. So there's no place to buckle up?
Yeah, I mean, I just was trying to think, like, you know, I think internally to where I am now, there's probably no less than 1,000 PPD documents, depending on what you do, you know, specific to what your role is, you know, and those guide some things. Then there's the overarching, that, like, you know, sexual harassment, dignity and respect.
Do you have training sessions that all new employees have to attend?
Yes. It's,
Do you lead those, or you have people who do
I
that?
have a team of people who do, based on subject matter
Only that?
expertise.
Or are there other,
That's part of, I have there's a training unit, there's an orientation where you go through onboarding for all your documents for benefits and electing life insurance.
And-
And then we have 3 days of training specific to things you need to know to be our employee.
is this a full-time job for these people? Or do they have other jobs
They
in
have
the
other-
corrections?
They have other jobs too. But there are training unit that they train lots of different stuff. But, you know, you're also talking about, we have academy staff for my sworn law enforcement officers that go to the Police Standards Training Academy for 8 weeks, and then they have firearms instruction, they have taser instruction. We have, you know, tactical, you know, if you go behind the walls, you have to have these certain things so that you can be free to walk around the prison. So lots and lots of different types of training.
How's that new women's prison working out?
It's working out pretty well.
It was a very nice facility.
It is a nice facility.
Okay, so I think we have our action items. So I will close the May 17th Ethics Committee meeting with our action items